Fourth graders, it's Mrs. Simpson here to talk to you about constructed responses. So we've been talking a lot about using the FAIR strategy and what each of those letters means. I just wanted to remind you that this poster is uploaded in the fourth grade shared folder that you go to find all of your work in the reading folder from week 4. So we talked about this poster last week, so that's where you can find it still. It doesn't disappear, it's still there. In case you need the help or in case you need to come back and reference it while you're working on your constructed responses for this week and upcoming weeks as well. So just wanted to remind you that that's there for you. It breaks down the FARE strategy and has a few example sentences right here on the right side. So what I wanted to do with you today is go over a constructed response question from last week. And I have an example answer here for you. And I just wanted to kind of break it down into the 4 parts of the FAIR strategy so that you have an example to come look at while you are writing your constructed responses for this week. And maybe if you want to go back and edit some of the earlier ones from this week, this might help you do that. So this is the prompt from last week that said, describe some challenges that enslaved people faced every day. Be sure to use the articles Changing Laws on Slavery, What is Racism, and The Lives of Enslaved People from Studies Weekly, week 21, to help you answer the question. So that is the prompt that you are working on. And down here, I just kind of have the FAIR strategy typed out to remind myself. And as I'm reading through my answer, I am going to highlight where I flipped the question in yellow, where I'm answering the question in purple, where I'm referring to the text in green, and where I'm explaining in blue. So let me get those drawing tools on. Let's see if I remember how to do this. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to change it to yellow first. And then this question, actually, you're going to be flipping and answering and giving evidence more than one time because it asks you for some challenges. So you weren't just telling me one challenge. You were giving, 2 or 3 of the challenges that you read about. So you kind of had to go through the FAIR strategy multiple times. So right here in the beginning, enslaved people face many challenges. That is flipping. Oh, that doesn't go straight, does it? Okay, well, we'll just do that anyway. Enslaved people face many challenges. So I kind of wrote a little introduction sentence to my answer, and I used words from the question in my answer. So that's part of my flipping strategy. And then I continue doing it. One challenge slaves faced. And then I did it again. Down here, I flipped it again when I was talking about a different challenge. Another challenge enslaved people faced. Whoa. And then I did it one. I know I gave 3, so I did it one final time right here. A final challenge enslaved people faced. So I did flip and I did flip the question multiple times. So let's now change to my purple color to see where I was answering. So answering this question means I was telling some of the challenges because that's what it is asking me for. So let's look through my answer for that. So here's a challenge. They had to do hard physical work. They were treated unfairly. Y'all, I apologize at how uneven this highlighting is, but we're just going to keep going. And the last challenge I talked about was staying together as a family. It was really hard for them to stay together as a family. So I flipped and I've answered, and then everything else that I haven't highlighted yet is where I refer to the text and I explain how that evidence helps to answer the question. So before I go back and do those, I'm just going to read the whole answer. So to answer the question, I said, enslaved people face many challenges. One challenge slaves faced was the hard physical work they had to do every day for nothing in return. I know this because in the article, The Lives of Enslaved People, it talked about how they had to work long hours with no pay on plantations or small farms. This is a challenge because working on a farm and being outside all the time is exhausting. And if they're not being paid for their work, then they aren't able to buy things like clothes and food for themselves. Another challenge enslaved people faced was being treated unfairly. They were treated like property, not human beings. In the article, Changing Laws on Slavery stated, none of the states believed in the complete equality of African Americans. This shows that even states of the North did not see African Americans as people who deserved the same rights as everyone else. A final challenge enslaved people faced was staying together as a family. According to the article, The Lives of Enslaved People, individuals could be sold away from their families and separated forever. For instance, children could be sold away from their parents and siblings separated from each other. These are just some of the many challenges enslaved people faced every day. Okay, so let's go back in and see where I referred to the text and where I explained that evidence. So I'm going to change over to green for my highlighter. And so for my answer, about one challenge was they had to do hard physical work every day. I talked about how in the article, The Lives of Enslaved People, it talked about how they had to work long hours with no pay on plantations or small farms. And then I went on to explain what that meant. I said, this is a challenge because working on a farm and being outside all the time is exhausting, and they are not being paid for their work If they aren't being paid for their work, then they aren't able to buy things like clothes and food for themselves. Okay, so that is my first example of using the whole FAIR strategy: flipping, answering, referring, and then explaining. And then another challenge I talked about was being treated unfairly. And then my referring to the text, I started right here. They were treated like property and not human beings. In the article, Changing Laws on Slavery stated, none of the states believed in the complete equality of African Americans. And then my next sentence went on to explain what that meant. I think this is the hardest part, where we sometimes forget to do this part. You're good at finding that evidence and being able to connect it back to the answer, but you've got to explain, what does that evidence tell you? How is that evidence helping you answer the question? So that quote that said none of the states believed in the complete equality of African Americans, that showed that even states in the North did not see African Americans as people who deserve the same rights as everyone else. So that's how I explain that. And then my last challenge that I talked about was that it was hard for them to stay together as a family. And I referred to the article, The Lives of Enslaved People again, where it talked about how they could be sold away from their families and separated forever. And then I kind of talked about some examples of how that happened in history. Sometimes it was children being sold away from their parents, or siblings being separated from each other. And then I'll go back to yellow for my last sentence, because it's kind of just flipping the question again. I gave a little concluding sentence at the end. These are just some of the many challenges enslaved people faced every day. So that looks a little sloppy, but it was the best I can do. And I hope that helps you kind of understand what we're looking for when we want a really well-written constructed response answer. Now, this one was kind of a really full paragraph because remember, back at the question, it's asking for not just one challenge, but challenges. So when when the question is asking for just one answer, your answer might not be as long as this example. But if the question is asking for more than one example of something, you might want to work on getting to an answer as long as this paragraph that I wrote. So I hope that helped out. And please, as always, go ahead and email us if you have any questions about how to answer constructed response questions. Talk to you later.